Hello, everyone. This is Tony Abad. Welcome to another episode of the Digital Diplomat. Our world is becoming increasingly digitalized. So we live in a digital environment, and it's the reality of looking at the screen and seeing the world through that screen. How do we increase our executive presence? How do we make our mark in this digital world? We have someone we're very, very fortunate to have with us all the way from Oklahoma City in the US to talk about how we can increase our executive presence. Lashley Pulsipher is a global leadership consultant and an ICF certified executive coach. And she is now a senior advisor to our TCP Growth for communications and executive presence. She is also a senior advisor and leader in the luxury sector across all the continents of the world. She has more than a decade of experience in this sector and understands exactly how you create presence. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Lashley. Well, Lashley, thank you for joining us all the way from the US.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Tony, for having me on your show. And I'm delighted to be here with your viewers.
So let's go straight to that question. What can you do to boost executive presence in a remote or digitalized environment?
Well, let's start with what is executive presence. There's a lot of talk about it. It's an important skill, ability, behavior to have and to strengthen as you move up in your career. And it really consists of three main areas. The first is appearance. How do you look? How do you stand? How do you walk into a room? The second is communication skills. Are you confident? Do you have good vocal tonality? Do you know your material and are you prepared? And then three is gravitas. Can you back up what you say with good experience and great ideas? So it kind of comes down to character, and that is something that also comes across on the virtual environment. But we can really focus in on the first two areas because there are easy things that we can do to really amp up our presence on these little boxes.
We're all putting our best foot forward when we're on the screen, but you're also mindful that the audience themselves is, thinking, is this person credible? Is this person trustworthy? How do you project trust in your, as part of executive presence?
Yeah, it really is imagining that you're in the room. If you're in the room with people, how would you be sitting? How would you be gesturing? Would you lean in towards the conversation? Hopefully you would. Do you lean into your camera? I've seen a few people on calls that look like this. There is no executive presence in this framing at all. Your head is small, it's an unflattering angle, and it doesn't show that you are there and present. So sit up tall, sit forward on your chair, don't lean back. Take up the screen. So I typically talk to my clients about being 1/3 of the frame should be your torso, and make sure your head isn't cut off at the top. But we really want to make sure that we are there, that we're present, and that we're showing our authentic selves. So yes, we want to work on the tone of our voice and peaks and valleys to keep the interest of our audience. And we want to make sure that that's our authentic voice, that we don't sound like robots, and that we have rehearsed and know our material enough that it comes across in a warm and genuine way.
Thank you. I'm already sort of listening to your tips and checking if I'm doing the same thing. Now, in that long experience of yours, the luxury sector, executive coaching, and teaching communications, could you share with us an interesting story that would highlight the importance of building this presence in a virtual environment?
I think, one of the things that I had the privilege of learning and working already in a virtual environment, I had teams based all over the world. So we did a lot of work by video conference. And so we were all coming from different countries, different cultures, sharing a common language of English, but often it wasn't people's first language. And so while they might have struggled with some of the words, that didn't really matter. It was how we showed up as communication professionals on our calls. And the nonverbal aspect of communication really plays an important part. So you can just think of, today people are asked to be on camera. Most of us are not used to seeing ourselves, to being filmed, to have our homes in the background before we figured out the Zoom virtual backgrounds. It has taken a toll on people and become quite tiring. And so when we think about meetings, just like we would want to with our teams, we want to really make sure that we energize the people in the room. So I've witnessed this in person, where people totally tune out to the speaker because they didn't hit these same marks of being engaging, having the right presence on stage. And I've seen a whole room of people tune out. And you can also see it in the virtual space. If people have their cameras on, you notice that eyes start going kind of off to the screen. They're looking down at their phones. You can really see and have almost even more feedback that you would in a live audience, how people are receiving the information. So it's instant, and you can really see people tuned in or tuned out.
There are now more and more people coming to face-to-face meetings. I mean, they're sort of getting over their this isolation and having to be on the screen. Do we see everyone going back to normal, or do you still see the importance of presence in a virtual environment? Are we going to see a new world, coming out of this pandemic?
I think just like work has become hybrid, office, and virtual, our meetings are going to remain the same. It makes a lot of sense for people to stay where they are and not have to take an airplane and book a hotel. And I travel every week for some of the consulting work that I do. It's very impractical to fly around, especially with fuel prices as they are today. I think a lot of companies are going to choose to remain in a collaborative but virtual space when it comes to meetings. And so being able to transition your skills from the boardroom to the Zoom room is really important.
I agree. Now I have this question that comes up whenever I get these invitations to face-to-face meetings. I think, shouldn't we just be doing this virtually, instead of maybe getting in a car and spending the next 30 or minutes to an hour in traffic, then coming to a very short meeting where you're going to accomplish the same thing. In the near future, you might be in a situation where you have hybrid conferences. In other words, you have to have presence both face-to-face and on screen. Have you had this experience?
I have. It is really hard to do both. And I've done this both live and recording. And so just like you would, again, if you are on stage or if you're in the boardroom, you really want to know your marks. Who are the important people at the table? Where is the camera? When you're making points, who is coming through the camera versus who is at the table? And when you're making certain points, you want to be able to direct your attention just like you would in the room. And so it takes a lot of awareness, preparation, and comfort. So I would recommend for that scenario, practicing and making sure that you have a good team to support you with the audiovisual aspects of that, because that is advanced meetings.
You've given us a lot of important pieces of advice with regard to executive presence, but I wanted you to maybe zero in for our audience on the one important thing that they should take away from this interview.
Absolutely. So there are a lot of I'm going to leave you with a couple tips because it's so hard to just pick one. When speakers speak on stage, and this is a little bit more of an advanced tip, but I think that we're all ready for it because we've had lots of practice in these boxes on a virtual meeting. When speakers on stage move across the stage, they should be moving with their topic. So there's a choreography to speaking on stage. Speakers who pace back and forth are not experienced. So just like that, we want to be really intentional with where we put our gestures in the screen and kind of use that space in our screen that's very blocked off in a geometric shape, a nice rectangle, to make our points, lead us to the next point, and then take us to the conclusion. So you can use your gestures in this space very strategically. Take up space in the screen. Like I said, that's another key point. And the main thing that I think is so important to remember as leaders, or even as a junior executive, someone who's a little bit lower in the ranks, when you are leading a meeting, you have a responsibility to all the people who've showed up to be engaging, to express your passion and your energy for the topic, to show that you're prepared, to use the tools that you have to make that meeting worthwhile. We all have been fatigued by being separated, isolated from each other. And so if we're coming together in this virtual space, you have a responsibility to make it fun and make it worthwhile.
Well, I could sense the passion in your voice. And Lashley, I hope one of these days I can sign up with you and get advice on building my own presence here on screen. Thank you so much. Before we go, I wanted to ask you about this up and coming show you have with TCP Growth. I mean, we're very lucky to have you on board, and you're coming up with a show called Influencing Up. And I'm excited to watch it and maybe even participate or help you out with it. Could you tell us more about this new show?
Yes, so thank you so much for asking. I'm delighted to be on the team with you and our other facilitators who are just bring so much talent and passion on certain topics that I think are very relevant to everybody. So Influencing Up will expand on the concepts of executive presence and really give you tactical, actionable steps. I'm going to have a lot of guests and experts on my show. We're going to talk about building rapport. How do you participate on a panel, for example? People are looking at expanding their thought leadership or establishing thought leadership. And there are so many opportunities for people to create their own content, really strengthen their personal brand, strengthen their personal network. And so we're going to talk about how all of those play into influence and how you can influence up. And hopefully that's to an even better leadership presence and hopefully lots of opportunities.
Well, you're sure to have me as your audience, and all about influencing the influencers. I think it's very important. Thank you very much, Lashley. It was a pleasure. Enjoyed the rather short but very meaningful discussion. And I hope you will join us again here on the Digital Diplomat sometime in the near future and give us more of this gems of wisdom in creating a more influential self in the digital space.
Thank you, Tony. Thank you.
This has been Tony Abad on the Digital Diplomat. We'll see you again in our next episode.